Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Board Games Hitting My Table. In this series I take a look at all of the games that I have been playing over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the first half of December 2023. Now before I get started on the games, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's start with the first game here with Municipium. We played a 3-player game of this rather niche area control game by Dr. Rainer Knizia. This game, if you don't know about it, it's a game where you're trying to maneuver your little pieces around this board, and you are essentially trying to have your pieces in the right place and at the right time. But the action system here is basically based on this random deck of cards which will show what's going to happen. So for example, I might say, well, this priest piece might move around to the next area and will grant one of these meeples to you. And you're basically trying to collect these sets of different meeples, and the first to collect a certain amount of meeples or sets of meeples will be the winner. But it's all about how you trigger the abilities on these different locations to your benefit. Now we did have a bit of a rushed game of this because we didn't have too much time before we had to stop. But I'm always interested to see how the different parts of the game interact with each other, how to leverage the pieces that other people need against them for your benefit, and so on. It's just a very interesting game, and I highly recommend it, with some very subtle technique and strategies in Municipium. I also played a 3-player game of Ys. So Ys are one of my favourite games from the Astari line. This one is like a bidding game, as you are trying to use these bidding cylinders for area control of these different regions. So I really like that kind of hybrid mechanism of bidding with these tokens. Some go face up, some go face down, so you have a bit of a bluffing aspect as well. And you're essentially trying to collect these different gems based on this commodity speculation mechanism. So you can actually manipulate some gems to be worth more than others, and of course hopefully you are trying to have the most of that type of gem. We had a very close game here, and something that I always underestimate in this game, or maybe overestimate in the game, is the value of those gems, because you could invest all your effort into getting a certain amount of gems, and you could get first place in there, but second place still get a healthy amount of points. So it's not really the difference between the two that you need to consider, it's just having the majority. So sometimes winning slightly is more efficient than completely smashing your opponents in these different fields. But I also like how there are areas within areas here, because not only are you trying to get the gems, you're trying to control the areas within those areas in order to get special powers, to get these black gems for set collection bonuses, and even just straight up victory points. This one, definitely a forgotten gem, and I rate it very highly indeed. Next up, we played a 3-player game of First Rat. So absolutely ecstatic to get a First Rat back to the table. If you're not aware, I used to own a First Rat. I actually sold it and ended up reacquiring it because I started to miss it. And this was a really reinforcing play that made me think, I'm so glad I got this game back into my collection, because it is that enjoyable. And it strikes a great balance of being such a simple rule set, being kind of charming in its approach, and inviting to a lot of players, but still having good tactical and strategic decisions here. So First Rat is a game where you're basically climbing up this track and collecting resources, and you're trying to trade in those resources to get these different spaceship parts built. You're racing to get right to the top of the spaceship here to get some points. You're building up a bit of an engine to increase your yield, to gather more resources more efficiently. So lots of different things you can kind of dip your toe into here. So that slight little degree of engine building, that slight little degree of resource management, and that race aspect, and even some cool special powers that you can acquire. And I was quite fortunate to gather quite a few of these special powers in this game, where I actually ended up taking a bit of a punt on one of the powers that let me cash in those spaceship parts for one resource fewer. And I thought, all the good powers have gone, I'll just take that one. But it ended up that power being probably the most beneficial to me. It's very useful, you know, when you're just one resource short, you can use that special power and bypass that. But first rat, one of the coolest games that came out in 2022, and yeah, I think it's a fantastic game. So that is First Rat. Also played a 3-player game of Picture Perfect. Truly a unique design. Basically a memory game where you're trying to organise all these different kind of guests at this table here, and all of these guests have an assigned envelope. And within that envelope, you're going to have different kind of criteria cards. So some of them might say, well, I want to be stood next to this character. I want to be stood next to the table. I want this character's face to be covered up. This kind of thing. And you only have a fraction of the information at any time. So therefore, as the envelopes are passed around, you need to remember the needs of the other people. So if you don't like memory, or if you strictly don't like memory, you might not like this one. But, you know, I'm generally not a huge fan of memory games, and I think this game is an absolute blast to play. And again, it feels so different to anything else. Now, I will say, I think a few house rules are required here. I think there's a few overwrought rules, and I completely just removed them from the game, and I think it's a better experience for it. I think I have reviewed this one, so if that one interests you, go check that one out on the channel. We played a 3-player game of Ingenius. Played this one with completely new gamer as well as a seasoned gamer, and it went down very well. I feel it did anyway. This is like an abstract tile placement game, very mainstream feeling. It kind of feels like this is a game that anybody could have in their collection, even if you're not a board gamer. And you are essentially filling up this big grid of these kind of domino style tiles, but they are like the hexagons, and you're trying to create pathways of the same pattern and score points for doing so. But for all of the different patterns or the different colours, you are going to score independently, and at the end of the game, your lowest one will be your final score. So you're always trying to keep them balanced as possible in order to just squeeze the win here. So this is deliberately designed to be very tight, and I think it was one fraction that changed it. I think I was on, say, like 9 on my lowest category, one of my opponents was on 8, and the other opponent was on 7. So as the game gets filled up, you do get more and more desperate to squeeze that 1 or 2 extra points, because it can be the absolute difference maker. But yeah, this one, strength to strength for me. I think it's a fantastic game, and I'm very happy to have it in my collection. In that same gaming session, we played a game of Cabo. Cabo is just an absolute blast. This one, it should not be as good as it is. It's just a simple memory style game, trying to take a gamble really when you think your bunch of cards are lower than your opponent's, and scoring points accordingly. So basically you are kind of somewhat rewarded for taking a gamble and winning, because you'll score no points, and the idea of this game is you want to have as few points as possible. Or if you take a gamble and you are incorrect, then you'll score some additional points, which is of course a bad thing. Now, I had an absolutely terrible start to the game of this one. I was like double or triple points ahead of my opponents. And there's this one little twist in this game where if you land on exactly 100 points, then you revert back to 50 points. And I needed 18 points exactly to do that. And I managed to pull it off and managed to squeeze the win because of that great reset. So this game, a very simple rule set, but those extra little touches of interest, such as that shoot the moon mechanism and stuff like that. This one takes it above and beyond, and I think this is a game that's always gone down well for me. And it has no right to do that, because it is on paper not a good game at all. In practice, it is fantastic. So that is Cabo. In that same game session, we played a game of Rapido. Probably one of the most fierce sessions of Rapido that I've played, where it's all about trying to kick each other off these steps. If you're not familiar with Rapido, it's quite similar to a game called Can't Stop, where you're rolling dice, trying not to go bust. And in this one, you're basically climbing this big staircase by rolling doubles, or also reserving your space on the separate staircase where people can kick you off if they roll higher than you, essentially. But probably the best push your luck game out there. And it was also known as Escape, as well as some other titles or different different actual names for the game. But yeah, I love that game. It's well embedded into my top 100. We played another game of Tiwanaku. So this was on my most recent board games ranked video, a deduction game where you are sweeping your way through this map, trying to find terrain types as well as these tiles within those terrains. Check out my review. In fact, I'm not sure if I've uploaded the review yet, but I have touched on it on my ranked video about why I like this game. But I have got a full review coming out soon as part of a compilation with some other deduction games. So keep an eye out for that one. Definitely a unique game. Everything works as it should. Now I will say, and this is going to be a slight spoiler on my review, I feel like the game is a little bit too dependent on other people taking a punt, taking a gamble, or taking a risk, and then everything kind of falls in place from that. So it does become a little bit too Mexican standoff like for me at times. But the gameplay is rock solid, and it definitely is a clean and well put together game. And in this most recent game, I did quite well based on the actual finding the terrain types rather than the actual deduction part of the game, because you are rewarded for discovering the diversity of terrain types rather than just keep on stockpiling on the same thing. That might not make sense, but check out my review, as I said. I also played a game of Telestrations. This is part of a kind of a Christmas party we attended. Absolute blast. I mean, this is one of the funniest games you can play. It's kind of like a game of Chinese whispers or telephone based on these dry erase boards. You're drawing something crazy, that the next person's going to write what they think you've drawn, then you're going to draw what they've written, and so on. And as you can imagine, as it's passed around the table, there are multiple ones going on at the same time, then the information gets kind of diluted and mistranslated, and it always ends up in hilarity. So again, always guaranteed a good time with Telestrations. It is just one of the best party games out there. I've also played a 3-player game of Takenoko. So it's been a long time since I've played Takenoko. Very cute family game, moving a panda around a board, eating bamboo, trying to grow bamboo, and place tile arrangements as well. I actually really enjoyed it. You know, it's been quite a long time since I played this one, so that might play a big part. They're very accessible. You're juggling several things at once, a little bit swingy at times, and I think it can go a tiny bit too long. But I think the gameplay is solid and it holds up well for a family weight style game. And finally, the big game here, I'm not even sure if it'll fit into frame, is Museum. So we actually played Museum after probably maybe 2 or 3 years of not hitting the table. Museum kind of faded into obscurity, and this is a set collection card game where you're using cards to bid for other cards or pay for other cards and put them in your museum. You're building kind of rows and columns of the same artifact types or region where they're from. Probably the best looking game I've ever seen, or at least top 3. It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, the Vincent Dutrait artwork is out of this world, and that kind of his style with that realism of the museum, just it looks great on the table. I mean, truly great. And that's saying something in this kind of current era of board gaming where we're spoilt for great artwork. This one is like 10 out of 10. I think the gameplay is good as well. I don't think the depth is really there. It is quite a shallow game, but I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. Again, just building sets of the same type of artifacts, simple stuff, but it is a nice package. You know, I do have the big deluxe version here, which is overproduced. There is a glut of stuff here for a bit of bloating, but again, the gameplay is good, and I would play it again because it is relatively quick, and there are different things you're going to see each game. So that is Museum. And that concludes it. That's all the games that I have been playing over the last couple of weeks. I managed to get some really good ones to the table. Some old Euros as well as some simpler party games and filler games. Nice to get games like First Rat back to the table as well, as I really did enjoy that play. Now, if you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.